Welcome back. This is part 2 of this review. This all started with my review of Jack Daniel's Old No. 7, so you can go back and watch part 1 if you want to, but you don't have to. This is Jim Beam Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, what is generally known as Jim Beam White Label. So this one, screw top, same as Jack Daniel's, 40%. This one is a Kentucky Straight Bourbon. So Jack Daniel's call themselves a Tennessee whiskey, and they don't specify that they're a straight whiskey. On Jim Beam, they are saying straight bourbon whiskey. So from that, we know that this is at least 2 years old. And from the fact that there's no age statement specified, the fact that it's a straight bourbon means that it's at least 4 years old. And one nice thing about all American whiskey, because it's American whiskey, we know there's going to be no colour in this. It is going to be 100% natural colour. So let's check out the nose on Jim Beam White Label. So immediately that's a much more interesting nose than the Jack Daniel's. It's actually quite a bit of fruity floweriness to the nose of this. Almost a little bit of Parma Violet. And there's a lot of sweetness, but it's not just your stereotypical sort of caramel, corn syrup notes that you get with a lot of bourbons. It's a lot more than that. There's a lot of juicy tropical fruit to the nose of this as well. So there's definitely quite a bit of lime and citrus in there. Maybe going as far as a little bit of pineapple and probably a little hint of cherry as well. It's a very sweet nose. You've got a lovely, slightly stereotypical corn syrup note wrapped in some quite nice cereally, biscuity, slightly rye, spicy notes. Sweet, but not too sweet, not overly sweet. Have got a little bit of planky oakiness in there and a little touch of mint, but the plankiness, the woodiness in this Jim Beam White Label, I wouldn't say it's a detriment at all. It's just another feature to this whiskey. Let's see how it tastes. So there's really a lot in common on the palate with the nose. A lot of those flavours that I was smelling are right there on the palate as well. Got that sweet fruitiness mixed with a nice sweet syrupy note, and you're also getting some light sour spicy woodiness, some light black pepper spiciness as well, and a little hint of licorice, which is quite interesting for a bourbon. Lovely little hint of cherry, and some really nice earthy peanut brittle in there as well. I do really like that peanut brittle note in a bourbon, and especially on the finish with this Jim Beam White Label, it just goes so well. As for the finish, I'm going to go medium for the Jim Beam White Label, with some lingering notes of corn syrup, a little bit of nuttiness, and some biscuity, grainy notes in there as well. It's not a super long finish, but it's a really nice one. As for a grade for Jim Beam White Label, I'm going to go for a B- on this one, so that's quite the clear winner over the Jack Daniel's. I would say that this is a big step up from your other standard budget, for want of a better word, bourbons, to the extent where if I was looking for a brand name bourbon which is good solid quality and fairly affordable, maybe to buy as a gift for someone, I would definitely go for Jim Beam, probably over anything else. It's fairly middle of the road, but it's still packed full of flavours, and it's just a really solid quality affordable bourbon. The only reason that I would not buy this is because if you're here in the UK, like I am, then Lidl's Western Gold, which has a very similar colour scheme and label and even bottle shape to this Jim Beam White Label, is a very similar product here in the UK for a little bit less money. And I've said in the review that I did for the Lidl's Western Gold that I think that Western Gold is probably made by the Jim Beam distillery. As to how the two compare, I would say that the White Label does have a little bit more flavour. It's got a little bit more power behind it. but the Lidl's Western Gold is quite a bit cheaper and it's a little bit more mellow as well. So if you like your drinks on the mellow, smooth, easygoing side, maybe check out Lidl's Western Gold. And if you like Western Gold and you haven't tried Jim Beam, which probably most people have, definitely give the Jim Beam White Label a try. So in the interests of science, I'm going to put that aside for a second and bring back the Jack Daniel's Old Number 7. And let's just have a quick A-B comparison. So Jack Daniel's in left hand, Jim Beam right hand. It's interesting, on the nose, they're both quite obviously fairly stereotypical bourbons, but when you compare the two, that it's weak. It's much weaker than the Jim Beam. It's watery, but it has such much more of a stereotypical bourbon aroma to it than the Jim Beam does. When you compare the two together, that's sweet and woody and nutty, it's your stereotypical bourbon, whereas the Jim Beam is all of those things as well, but it's got so much more going on. I think in particular it's the sweet, slightly sweet and sour, sharp, actual fruit sweetness, that fruitiness. It really gives it not just an extra dimension, many more dimensions. And when you compare the two, if you were drinking these blind, I think most people would identify this as a bourbon, but if you had this as your reference and then you smelt the Jim Beam, that fruitiness might really throw you. You might mistakenly identify this as a Scotch or even an Irish whiskey with this as your base reference. It's that different. Let's just compare the palate. So as I said before, fairly stereotypical American whiskey, but not a good one. A little bit of an odd glue taste again. Thin, too much bitter wood. Let's go with the Jim Beam. Probably should have drunk some water between those two. So I'm getting a really odd clashing of flavours between the slightly odd notes on the Jack Daniel's. With the Jim Beam, it's creating some really odd sort of tertiary flavours that are mixed between the two. But I'm getting so much more flavour from the Jim Beam. Sweet, everything is just that little bit more sweetness. It's not underpowered. It's 40%, but it's not underpowered. It's perfectly drinkable. It's not weak. It's not watery. For the money, Jim Beam. Let's get rid of you. For the money, the Jim Beam White Label is a really solid product. Really like that one. So if you've liked this video, remember to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you think of this video, and let me know what you think is the best bargain in the bourbon world. Are you a Jack Daniel's fan, or Jim Beam, or something else? Thanks for watching.